It's not in the face! Thank you.
Hello and welcome to Hey, Not the Face with your host, John Nash, and your producer, me, Steffi Haynes. And today we are going to talk about Conor McGregor. We are also going to talk about Bare Knuckle FC. We're going to get into some PFL and some MVP. We are even going to take a brief swipe at Tim Kennedy there and talk about him for a minute. But in order to get access to all of that, you do need to subscribe so that you can get the stuff that'll end up behind the paywall. Now, John, how the heck are you?
Oh, exhausted.
Oh.
Just exhausted. I'm getting very little sleep. I am in the Twin Cities watching my elderly mom, taking care of her. And the last few days have been very, very, very tiring.
Oh, well, you know what? I hope you get some rest after we're done recording.
I might get some rest during the recording.
No, we can't have that. We need you sharp and focused for this episode because who else is going to talk about Conor McGregor than us?
Oh, I'm sure everybody on the internet is going to talk about him.
So, today, Azealia Banks dropped compromising photos of Conor McGregor. Now, they have since been deleted by Twitter's admin, but they stayed up for several hours. We don't want to get into that particular part of it. What I do want to get into is, could his antics, especially this latest one where he is all the way out there, could that possibly impact his partners at the UFC?
Well, I know it's going to impact me because I logged on to Twitter. And of course, the degenerates that I follow that make up my feed on Twitter are going to have that photo everywhere. And so I had to see that, logged out, and I think I quit Twitter the rest of the day. I didn't need to see that. Do I think it's going to impact his partners UFC? No, I don't. I mean, if a few years ago, I think this would have an impact, but I think everyone has moved on. I think the UFC, I think they've moved on. I think part of the UFC's ploy was always to drag out negotiations with Conor just to prevent him from ever getting out of the UFC and going to fight somewhere else. I think that was one of their objectives, and they've succeeded. His career has basically come to an end without him ever getting out of the UFC and doing big matches on his own and not possibly MMA, but more likely in boxing. That never got to happen. And also, I think the broadcast partners, I don't think any of them are sitting around waiting for a big Conor McGregor fight. I think they wanted one last year to show that they could generate big sales for the negotiations. But this, at this point, him coming back is incredibly unlikely, even though, I'm sure we'll talk about some of the conversations he's had and discussion he's had about coming back. But I think people realize he is a spent force in the sport, no matter how much interest there still might kind of be in him. And he is just a walking mess. In fact, I have to really think, I cannot recall someone that reached the heights he did in sports celebrity and has seemed so pathetic at this point of his career in only a few years.
Yeah, for sure. And it should be noted that today is his birthday. He is 37 years old today, and he got a double whammy. He got the first one from Azealia Banks, and then later in the afternoon, the UFC proper released the video of Dustin Poirier knocking him out. So, yeah, there's also that.
Happy birthday. Happy Bastille Day.
Now, have you spoken with anyone from the Irish media? And if you have, what do they think of his run of bad behavior and basic nefarious activity? Because let's not forget, he was found civilly liable for sexual assault earlier this year. So what do they have to say?
Well, I do speak to a few members of the Irish media. I'm not going to say which ones individually said because it was just private communications off the record. I don't know if they want what the discussion was publicized, but I will say that it does seem amongst the Irish media, does seem the ones that I've spoken to, and not all of them cover MMA specifically. A lot of the people I talk to are people that peripherally cover MMA because of Conor McGregor. I will say that they think he's disgusting and embarrassing. He's a consensus. He is not popular. He's not popular amongst the populace. They talk about he is one of the least popular people in Ireland right now. He has a fan base, a hardcore fan base, but amongst the vast majority, if you do approval polls, he is in the gutter. Most people in Ireland find him disgusting, his behavior, and they find him embarrassing that he's the most famous person from Ireland right now. But amongst some of them, there is a little bit of blame they cast at the UFC, which, I mean, partly maybe you could view a little as unfair to the UFC because adults should make up their own decisions and are in control of their actions. But their thinking is that, everybody knows McGregor is a kind of a nutcase, loose cannon, has problems when he's not focused and not like in training camp because he gets bored. And some of them do hold blame the UFC. They think that because the UFC was the way they negotiated with him was basically to freeze him out at times, and they did not give him fights. That that if he was having fights booked, he was more likely to have stayed out of trouble than when he was left to his own
devices,
his own devices, his own activities, his own evil thoughts entered it. I'm not gonna sugarcoat how terrible some of his behavior is, but so there is, some of them do hold. I wouldn't say they don't say he's not responsible for his own actions, but they do think that we wouldn't be having so many embarrassing Conor stories if at the same time the UFC did not basically freeze him out for long portions of his career.
Dana White gave an interview just a few days ago where he said that both Jon Jones and Conor McGregor could end up on that White House card next year. Do you think Conor still has a place on that card or any future UFC event?
I don't think this is so embarrassing. I mean, it's embarrassing, but I don't think it's so bad that it crossed the line that they wouldn't book him. I mean, if he really wants to fight at the White House event next year, I think they would find a spot for him. I mean, who knows if he really does, because he says he wants to fight on everything and then never materializes. I also noticed during his BKFC presser, he talked about bleeding for a company, aka, the unsaid company was UFC, and getting nothing. So it didn't sound like he was had goodwill to the UFC at this point. So I guess my big question is, who knows if he really wants to fight in the White House, if they really do that card, I think it's possible, barring, some more crimes coming to light that prevent the Secret Service from even letting him in the building. I think it's likely he's on it, but again, who knows where he says a lot of stuff. Who knows where he's really at?
While we're talking about Conor, and because you mentioned Bare Knuckle FC's PR event, he and Dave Feldman announced this huge tournament. They also announced several new signings, and some of those signings are kind of big names. Sure, they're UFC washouts, but for Bare Knuckle, they've got some name value. We've got Yoel Romero, we've got Derek Brunson, we've got Thiago Santos, we've got Aspen Ladd. We even have former boxer James DeGale as a signee. And they also talked about giving fighters equity in the company. So maybe you could address some of these things and give us your thoughts on this massive PR bundle of information.
Well, as a PR move, it seemed to work because I noticed a lot of people talking about it. Now, personally, and here's some of my thoughts. One is, these are a lot of over-the-hill fighters. Yoel Romero's approaching 50. I don't care if he still looks amazing shape. He's still approaching 50. I do not know if that's a safe age to continue fighting at. But, here we are. They got some press out of it, but none of these are these are not prime athletes. And so when people talk about BKFC making this big move, I don't see it. That doesn't sound like the roster you signed to blow up like a UFC did back in the day with Tough. That's one. To the tournament. Now, that made a big splash, and it sounds very impressive. It is 32-man tournament, $15 million for the first place. So if you win, that's a large amount of money in combat sports, especially for non-UFC headliner types. But you got to break it down a little bit, because I think people get very excited. This is the purpose of tournaments in so many ways. This is, people see the end result, the winner amount, and they think, wow, it pays so well. But one, it's a 32-man tournament. That's 5 rounds. So you have to win 5 fights to collect your prize. The winner who gets first place, he gets $15 million for those 5 fights. So he gets $3 million per fight, which is really good. But, that's why you do not get this. It wouldn't be enticing to a John Jones or someone like that, this type of card, because they're making more than $3 million a fight. So that's why the biggest name fighters are not going to be enticed to get in a tournament like this, even though it sounds like one of the biggest paydays ever in fighting. Second place, though, is $1 million, which is still good, but for 5 rounds, that ends up being $200,000 a fight. Well, a lot of fighters in PFL, UFC are making more than that guaranteed per fight. They do not have to win 4 fights and then lose a championship fight to get $200,000 a fight. They get it every fight. So that's a massive drop off, and also shows you the type of fighters you're going to get, because if you're a fighter like, Sean O'Malley level, you might not get no longer champ. You might not get $3 million a fight. Aljamain Sterling is probably another one right now, but you're definitely getting more than $200,000 a fight under your contract. Do you want to, that's why fighters like that wouldn't take it. And then you go down the line, the 3rd and 4th place. Well, 3rd place means that you fought, 3rd and 4th place means that you fought in 4 events. You get $500,000. That's $125,000 a fight. So the amount, $25 million sounds very impressive, but per round, there's very little guarantee for these fighters. Being in the tournament, you get $100,000. Winning the first round, losing second, you get $200,000. So $100,000 per fight. That's okay, but these are not high level purses. So that's my other thought. The tournament level, the pay. Now we get to the equity part. I probably have the most questions about, because one is, as they said, it's equity. It starts at $100,000 if you're a BKFC champ, and if you win 10 title defenses as a BKF champ, it goes up to $3 million in equity, which is great. But as they noted, they try to do pension plans, and that couldn't work. I didn't get a really excellent explanation from them on why the pensions were so much harder than equity, but they said they couldn't do pensions, and so they've gone to the equity. So my question about equity is, equity in what? Bare Knuckle BKFC right now is owned by Triller. You get equity, you'd get it in BKFC, but it's almost completely owned by Triller, so your equity would possibly be watered down. Also, do you have any control over the valuation, the selling of your shares? There's just a lot of questions because Triller, not Triller, but BKFC is not a standalone entity. So that was one. My other question, and this was not stated, but I do have a question. Is it possible that the champion of that tournament, that's not $15 million cash, that is going to be partly paid in equity? I think it's cash, the way they said. But if I'm in this tournament, I'm looking at the contract, making sure that I am not getting equity in replace of just cash. That's another question I'd have for that, what the equity is. And the final thing is, it sounds impressive, but purses for high level fighters are higher than what that equity be. How long do you have to wait to get that equity? The other question I have is when they said I think they put at the high point, their maximum or the best case scenario, you'd get $3 million as a champion, $3 million invested into BKFC. Well, is that based on a future projection? Is that based on the current valuation of BKFC? Would I get $3 million in shares based on now? Or is that based on a future projection? So in other words, that $3 million value is what it'd be worth if BKFC does as well as they think it's going to do. And so it'd be a future inflated value from where it is now, then you'd get $3 million. So a lot of questions I have about the equity plan. Nice, you give them equity, but like I mentioned a little while ago, purses usually would be more than that. You would get top fighters, the very best, in MMA are getting a lot more than a couple $100,000 per fight, which you're getting equity. And so I wonder if part of this is, part of it is a way to mass payments or to make it an alternate type of payment to fighters. Like, we will give you equity instead of paying you because they're maybe under a money crunch with the Triller ownership. Or is it possibly a way to rope fighters in that, it's sunk cost. I fought in BKFC this long. I don't want to leave. And for someone that's going to pay more because I potentially have a large amount of equity coming to me if I stick around. So that's my thoughts right now. I'm going to wait and see until we get more information about how this plan actually works.
Question. Do they have any kind of responsibility to tell these fighters if there's some little clause in the contract that says this prize money is partially equity, or is it just enough to have it written in the contract?
No, they would have to notify you that part of it's going to be paid in ownership because you take them to court. Otherwise, that you were promised a payment. But I mean, we know fighters are desperate for big purses. We know that, that how many people got excited for GFL, even though there's no chance it was going to even have an event, but everybody got excited because they wanted those big purses. They want some payment because everything outside the UFC and maybe the top fighters in PFL doesn't pay anything. And so it doesn't seem impossible for me that they would put that in there, that you were going to get paid this in the lump sum or a portion of it in equity in the company. And a fighter would just ignore that because all they care about is getting some money, that the other payments would be enticing enough. I don't think that'd be impossible to imagine. But yes, if you have a manager, I would definitely look at the contract. I mean, or maybe they're counting on a lot of fighters not having attorneys and managers look over those contracts and not realizing what the payment is. But again, we don't know. I imagine that they're just getting cash. I imagine they're not getting equity. But as soon as they announce that these purses and equity on the same event show, it kind of married in my mind that would be a possible way. That would be a possible marriage of the two. So I would just double check. That's all I'm saying.
What about Trillers' financial problems? How is Bare Knuckle FC managing all of this big tournament and equity and all of these new hires while they're still under Trillers' purview?
Well, that's one of the big questions about that equity is because they're still owned by Trillers. So how valuable could this be if you are, part of a company that seems to be in terrible financial straits, and who knows what rules they have in the BKFC, how much the valuation of everybody's shares can be watered down in the future. We don't know. So that's a big question. The other thing I have to wonder is how much are offers of equity a way for them to keep fighters and make offers to them without paying them because they are in financial straits because of Triller. As I hinted before, that's another question. So, I would like to know what Triller's current financial situation is, but they haven't not released their filings that are about, 6 months late at this point. So until that happens, we are kind of in the dark about where they currently exist financially, but it does, from all reporting, it doesn't sound like they're doing that well.
Could Bare Knuckle FC raise any kind of funding and it not go to Triller? Like, could they raise their own money for this stuff and Triller wouldn't be able to touch it? I'm a little cloudy on that.
Well, no. Well, I mean, you could set up anyway. If you have a parent company, they could either sell shares to that company. So there'd be outside ownership, would own a bigger part of the company. They could, they could create more shares. And so, of smaller, that they're selling shares to people, but the value of the company the value per share is actually decreasing. That's a possibility. There's multiple ways they could inject capital into Triller with either, giving up a portion of their control or not giving up any. The question is, who would want to put money into BKFC with, Triller still having some ownership in it? That'd be the question. I mean, another possibility, but that seems to be a problem because possibly they put Triller up as collateral on loans. That's the asset they use because it's the most valuable piece of Triller's properties, apparently, is another possibility to be just to sell BKFC, right? But there might be problems with that because Triller doesn't want to get rid of them because BKFC is their most valuable property. So I'm somewhat shocked because I thought the big announcement was going to be not equity. I thought the big announcement would be that someone else is buying them from Triller. That didn't happen. So that's why I have a few questions about this equity plan because is it masking something else?
Is Bare Knuckle FC in any way, shape, or form as successful as they're trying to project?
I don't think so. I mean, we saw some of their finances. They seem to be doing okay, blowing up. Now they have projections where they're going to be like 4 times as big, have an evaluation, I think, of 300 to 400 million, some absurd amount. I find that impossible because if you look, they do mostly pay-per-views. That they're a pay-per-view product in the United States. They sell some pay-per-views, but I've never seen their numbers, so I don't know how much they sell. Apparently, they sell more than some MMA promotions do, but when you're not the UFC, that doesn't mean much. So it could be very little and still be financially successful for them. But they do gates, but their gates are not massive. They've packed a few arenas, but we're not talking about multiple $1 million gates. We don't see that with them. They're not on network TV, so we don't. Best knowledge, they have no big broadcast deal, which is a major portion of this. They're not getting big sponsorship. So the revenue, they do have revenue. They probably generate more revenue than almost any other MMA promotion out there besides the UFC and the big ones. But that doesn't make you huge, right? And so I don't think I just don't think as much as they present themselves as this big sport that they really are the next Ultimate Fighter blowing up to be the next great craze, because there's a limit to what people are willing to watch. There's a limit to what broadcasters will put on. We thought we stepped over that line and there was no barrier anymore after they started putting MMA on TV, but apparently, guys bleeding profusely everywhere is something they do not want to put on TV, and it's something that sponsors do not want to be involved in. And so, there is a definite cap outside unless they can start selling mega amount of pay-per-views, which is possible maybe if Conor McGregor comes back, but comes back and fights in BKFC. But unless they do something like that, there's a hard ceiling to how big BKFC can be.
Let's change gears here and talk about PFL, because they had some announcements of their own last week, primarily that they have a new CEO and his name is John Martin. They went out of their way to inform the media that he's a black belt in karate. Now, I need to know why you think they did that particular move, and what else do we know about Mr. Martin?
Well, what seems to be was unfortunate is they didn't announce or make a big deal about the fact that I believe he has a purple belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu as well. Mm-hmm. And so, there's a couple thoughts. One is the person that put this together, it does not know much about the combat space sports audience, who would have been much more, excited about hearing that. Think that's more impressive. I don't think that's the case. I think it's more that they were targeting, again, PFL often targets the business community. I think in this case, they were targeting the business community, and they thought having a black belt would sound impressive to people that are not that familiar, knowledgeable about the sport. I think that was the reason behind that. And I also think the signal here is with the announcement for why he's here is because he's someone with experience negotiating broadcast deals. He has worked, as a major executive on the TNT, I believe it was. I could be wrong on that one. For some reason, I'm drawing a blank because I'm exhausted with my care out here.
You're right. It's TNT and the Turner Networks.
I think I'm just going off the top of my head, and I just could not remember exactly. But he's a major executive, done negotiations, and they want a signal here that they're going to get a much bigger rights deal after the UFC signs their deal. So that's what we are bringing in a major player that knows everybody, who the way he's talking, even, he's basically describing how our valuation, there's much more money out there for someone like us. I'm here to get it. And that's been, as we've talked about, multiple times over the last couple of years, the PFL's entire goal is almost their entire goal is when the UFC gets their massive next deal, the PFL wants to be there as an alternative for someone that did not get the UFC or wants additional content to fill in for not having all the UFC content, and get a much, much bigger deal than they have now. And that has been the goal of the company, because a big TV rights deal will basically make up for all the money they put into this company. And that's their goal. And so that's why they brought him in, because he is the guy that has the experience, the knowledge, and the connections to kind of make a deal like that happen.
Now, Martin said that Don Davis told him that PFL makes around $1 million per event. Does that sound accurate to you? And further, do we have an idea what their current deal pays out right now? Or is he saying that $1 million per event is what the current deal is? To access the bonus content of this episode, you must be a paid subscriber. To do that, go to heynottheface.substack.com and subscribe today.
Ow! Ow! Not the face! Ooh! Ooh! Okay, the face!